It's very hot.
Recording is now in progress, or progress, obviously, in the real world. So when it comes to it, Juliette, we'll let you share yours. I'll let you share yours second for that reason. And has either of you listened to any of my previous issues,
Yes,
editions? So you know that we'll chat for a bit, then we'll share one image, then the other person will guess, then we'll chat for a bit, then we'll share the other image, and the other person will guess, and we'll chat for a bit, and half an hour will have passed. And will have taken longer than half an hour, but you won't notice that. And then when it edits down, you'll think, yes, it only took half an hour after all. So today's recording may include strong language and adult themes. It may not. Keep your fingers crossed. You could be lucky. Hello and welcome to Comic Cuts, the panel show. My name's Kev F Sutherland. You might know me as a writer and artist for Beano, Marvel Comics, Oink, Doctor Who, the Scottish Falsetto Sock Puppet Theatre, and my graphic novel adaptations of Shakespeare, but chances are you probably don't. My guests today talking comics are Juliette Burton and Gary Northfield. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, and now this is the bit for which you have to brace yourself. I'm going to do my theme tune, which I do live. It's an acquired taste. Comic Cuts. We're looking at a panel, and we comprise a panel. There's a few of us. So the panel sees a panel, then we talk about the comics. From the panel we discuss, and we call it Comic Cuts. Be honest.
Very nice.
Very lovely. I'm impressed with the timing.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you have to say something. I have two guests with me today who've brought with them a panel from a comic or something close. We're going to see if we can identify it and talk about it. Maybe we and you will learn something about comics we didn't already know, or maybe we'll just show off a bit and have an enjoyable chat. Let's see. Juliette, are you joining me from London?
I am in London currently. Yes, I am currently in London.
In that London. Yes, being in that London, you're in the heart of things. During the pandemic, did being in the heart of things feel rather futile?
It's a good question to ask because so I come from a family in the countryside that we don't really see each other that often. But at the beginning of lockdown, they were like, come back, like just stop paying rent in London and come back. And my instinct was, no, I need to stay here. And actually, I think it's been a really good choice because I've been able to keep up my running, and I run past like St. Paul's and the Tower of London and the Globe, and every time I run past, I'm like, you guys have seen the plague before, you've survived bigger than this, so let's just keep going. And yeah, it's just there's a lot of stuff to discover even when everything's shut, so lots of history. And lots of friends did stay in London as well, so I did manage to, when we were allowed to, meet up with a few actual people instead of buildings, although buildings are my friends now.
Did you find you were seeing more of town than you ever knew existed because you had to walk places?
Absolutely. I mean, I live in an area in the southeast of London that I now know very well, and I've made some new friends that happen to be my neighbours because, like, needs must, right? When you're not allowed to see anybody, then you've got to make new friends. So yeah, I feel like I know all the history of the Docklands area and Rotherhithe and Greenwich. I've done all of the walking tours I possibly can with those books. So yeah, I feel, I mean, there's no qualification at the end of it, which is frustrating. But yeah, I definitely could give you guys a tour whenever you want to come down.
Because you are a stand-up comedian, you're used to communicating with people live. So was it a big transition to go online? Because you did a lot online.
Yes, I did do a lot online. It's interesting. I love doing stand-up comedy, and I think comedy is all about a conversation with the audience. And I think that when we did the online shows, they were a different art form. Like, trying to expect them to be the same as a live show, it was just that was futile. Living in London wasn't, but that was expecting it to be the same. It was just impossible because I think it's the audience. I think we're treating it more of a passive experience rather than an active experience, because naturally it's a screen, so you can't pick up on social temperatures in the room, you're not fully present. You haven't done the whole the I was about to say rigmarole, but that sounds like a negative, but I mean it in a positive way, of like the ritual of the pre-show. You get to the venue, whether you're an audience or a member or a performer, you have to do the commute to the venue, then you get yourself ready, get yourself a drink, get yourself seated, get yourself back, if you're backstage, get yourself mentally prepared, and then we're doing the whole pageantry of it. That's not rigmarole, pageantry is the word. But we're all buying into that as a bonding community experience. And then when you're doing it on online, it wasn't that. It was still a bonding experience, but the thing that I found was the saving grace was that a lot of my hour-long shows use multimedia. So because I've got interactive videos and like hidden camera videos in a lot of my old shows, and as well as like animations and all sorts of stuff on multimedia that I used to rely on too much, and then I think I found a healthy balance with it. But then when we started doing online shows, it turned out like that was actually a really wonderful positive, because it is a bit more like TV. So if I brought that in as part of a live show, then kind of chatted to people in the chat, and doing like stand-up comedy in between either the videos or the animations or whatever it is, then it just gave everyone a bit of a break, and also upped the energy of the online room, I think.
Did you find the reaching parts of the world that you couldn't previously reach was a feature?
Yes, I did some corporates which were very odd, because they were like, people were in India and Germany and America and Australia, and I was like, this is wonderful, this is amazing, like the biggest geographical audience I've ever performed to at one time. And the other lovely thing was that I've performed in Australia. I've toured in Australia 3 times, and then had to stop because I was focusing on touring in the UK. And those people in Australia were coming to some of my online shows, and it was like, oh, guy, I want to give you a post-show hug, and I can't because of lots of reasons. But yeah, it was definitely, it reminded me that comedy is a community, and if there are people out there who are so keen to be a part of that community that they'll endure online shows, which I say that negatively, but again, I think if you make it work for you as a new art form, then that's useful. I'm still getting used to Twitch though. Twitch and I are still learning from each other. Twitch is learning a lot less about me than I'm learning about Twitch.
Kindness in quarantine was an extra sort of thematic step, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, that was very good research. That was an online version, well, an online extract of a show that I did called Butterfly Effect, that was toured in the UK in 2018, and sold out at Edinburgh as well, which was lovely. I think the kindness in quarantine was one that I think a lot of people were sort of saying, what can you do? What shows can you bring to these festivals online? And it seemed like a natural thing to want to talk about, because when I created Butterfly Effect, it was at a time when I felt really powerless in my life, and I focused on the one power that we all have, which is how kind we are to other people, and also how kind we are to ourselves. And I find it very hard to be kind to myself, and the lockdown, the pandemic, has certainly left me, because there's nowhere else to go apart from your own thoughts. So I tried to put all of that into that online rewritten version, Kindness in Quarantine, to help us all focus a bit more on the power that we do have. We still have it. We can still be kind, and especially during this time where it's incredibly stressful, and it's very easy to take it out, the stress out on other people, and it's it can make a huge difference if you just act a little bit more kindly towards others, and it can change the world. There are people that I've met who've they've said that a small act of kindness has genuinely saved their life, because they might have been in a suicidal ideation phase, and possibly even planning to end their life, and having something as amazing as just a small act of kindness from a complete stranger it can keep you going. And for me, during lockdown, like, honestly, the small acts of kindness that people have given me, it just gives you that burst of energy and reminds you that you're not alone, and that there is humanity out there. We are connected.
I don't think it would surprise anyone to discover that you're the ambassador for Rethink Mental Illness.
Yes, I am the ambassador of Rethink.
You do your job full time.
Well, I mean, the hard work is is just managing my mental health. I've got to constantly rethink my mental illness because it's constantly there. So yeah, I do love Rethink. In fact, have gone for a run this morning wearing one of their running vests. So yeah. Yes, I have a lot of different mental health diagnoses. I was diagnosed in my lifetime with 13 different mental health conditions, some of which I've fully recovered from, some of which I manage on a daily basis. And Rethink asked me to be an ambassador a few years ago, and I love them to pieces because they do what they say on the tin. They constantly get people to rethink what mental illness is, and mental health. We're all very aware of mental health now, aren't we? Aren't we all so bored of mental health because we've all been banging on about mental health? Everyone's been bringing it up in every conversation. Honestly, usually it's probably me that's the one that starts bringing it up, but I think that we've raised awareness of mental health. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. Mental illness is something different, and it's when you get diagnosed with an actual illness that's debilitating and can be life-threatening to you. And yes, Rethink offers amazing support to people, and they've told me that during the pandemic they've seen the visits to the website skyrocket and the calls to the helpline absolutely skyrocket. Just so many people are in desperate need at the same time as the charities being in desperate need of extra funding. So it's just all a bit difficult at the moment, but I do think there's hope. I think that 2020 has cracked the nut, pun intended, of mental health. Whereas we're all talking about it, we're all aware that when you're left with your own thoughts, it can get really, really dark. And that I think that now we need to move it forward to talk about better funding for mental health services, as well as making sure that people are aware of the darker stuff, like not in a way that means that it's head and hands woe is me, but in a way that's like let's talk about the illnesses that like schizophrenia and having hallucinations, and not just depression when you're struggling to get out of bed and crying a lot, but depression where it's completely like suicide ideation. Now, and that might not sound like topics of comedy shows, but I do find that comedy is an amazing tool because people get tense about these things and then you don't talk about it and then you feel alone. But in a room full of people laughing with you, if you're laughing at somebody talking about their experiences from an informed perspective, responsible perspective that isn't triggering, and I use that phrase legitimately, not the way that people on Twitter use it, but triggering as in actually harmful to somebody, so actually harming their mental health. As long as it's not doing that, as long as everyone's laughing, then it can break down barriers and increase understanding. Comedy can, and help people feel less alone. So that's why I love comedy.
Yes, when comedy is sharing and listening in this way, then you are one of the forefront of the comedians using their platform to explore and hopefully do something good in that direction. And we do it internationally. We were talking about your international travel. I don't know though, Juliette, whether you've been translated internationally. However, I have someone here who has. Gary, how many languages have they translated your books into now?
I've no. The Judy Zebra, I think, is about 13 books with a couple more on the way, and there's a couple other books which had different languages, so you can kind of top them all up for us.
It would be cruel to challenge you to suddenly try and guess and name those languages. Do you know them?
Have you done your research in it?
No, I haven't, which is why the spotlight is now on you. Go on.
You want to go for it? Okay.
I've got 13 fingers. Start now.
Oh my God. Slovakia, Czech. So there's 2 different ones nowadays. So that was good. And Canada. Spanish.
What language do they translate it into? Canadian. French, Canadian, and French. So that would be 2 Frenches you've got there.
Oh no, I might have cheated. It might be just the French Canadian.
Well, I'm back down to 3 fingers.
I got Dutch. I got Italian, Persian, which was a nice one. And that was the nicest book as well. The design on that was just beautiful. It was really lovely. Really nice.
Well, yes, because the lettering will have an attractive look about it as well.
They did so many bad things. They did all this kind of taking all the characters and the way they kind of designed it and placed them, and had all these kind of single color spot colors all for it. It was amazing what they did. It was so beautiful.
I'm actually I'm going to show my ignorance in Persian. Does that go up and down?
Very likely. I have no idea either. I can't remember. It was about 18 months ago I last looked at it. So yeah. I don't think so. I think it's one of the back to front ones.
And dear listener, 7 other languages. And Gary, people, well, a lot of people will know you from Julius Zebra. Of course, I'll put Julius Zebra. Which one is it?
Officially Zebra. When I wrote the book, it was Zebra, and I've literally lost sleep over it because some of the jokes don't quite work if it's Zebra, and some don't work if it's Zebra, because they call him Deborah and Barbara, and I literally lost sleep over it. I had to make a decision by a particular Monday what we're going to do, and I was awake all night thinking about it. So.
Well, it doesn't really matter.
It's
been translated into 13 languages, and I can't imagine it's Julius Zebra in more than half of those.
No, that's true.
But we first crossed paths in the Beano with Derek the Sheep, where you pulled off a ridiculous coup of holding on to the copyright of your character.
Yeah, that was very odd. Yes, I've been making little tiny mini comics, like fun, silly little things, little sketchy comics, and then I've been working for Horrible Histories magazine.
Right.
And so I did about a year working on Horrible Histories, and I thought, well, I think Ewan and Morris were down from Scotland. They're the editors of the Dandy and the Beano at the time. It's what, 2002, I think it was, or 2003, and they were in London for a big comic fair. And I thought, well, I'm going to show my portfolio. I can do comic strips, and I've been in the Horrible Histories. Maybe I can get some illustration work on the Beano. And I thought, I better show I can do some actual comics. So I put this silly sheep strip in my portfolio. And Ewan said, oh, I really like this. Can you send it to me? And he said, we'd like to use it. And then he offered me either we keep the rights or you keep the rights. What do you want to do? And I was like, oh, well, let me have a think. And I think it's because I submitted it as a whole thing. I asked him about it a year or so later. I said, why is it? Because I get quite a lot of people asking me, how did you do it? It's because it was submitted as a fully fledged finished strip, whereas most people either say, look, here's some drawings of Dennis the Menace I've done, or I've written some scripts for, Roger the Dodger. Whereas I come in with this completely brand new character. So I think that was what it was.
That particular editor, Ewan Kerr, listeners, was the editor who was fool enough to let me into the Beano in my heyday as well. He was a very innovative editor who really allowed artists their creative head. In fact, the way you write scripts or wrote the Derek the Sheep script was quite unusual, wasn't it? You didn't type a script or even send off a full plan in advance, did you?
No, I would send in like a really rough drawing with all the balloons roughed in. I would write and draw it at the same time but the first kind of 6 or 7 strips I did, I made up as I went along completely, because that's all I knew. That's how I used to make comic strips. But then it wasn't quite working, and I spoke to a chap called, do you know Glenn Dakin?
Yes.
He was working on Horrible Histories at the time, and he'd worked on a lot of books and television and things. And so I thought I'll ask him about how do I start making things a bit better. I'm in there, I've gone to a certain level. How do I take it to the next step? So he told me about like story structures and extra characters and sidekicks and things like that. So that's when I brought in like Cecil the Bee and other things, and I just started going off-road in different ways, and that's when that's when it started really taking off. I really started enjoying myself with the comic strip, and
it's quite an informative tale for kids who might want to get into comic creating. That the rules that you're told of how things must be done, type scripts must be done this way, thumbnail sketches must be done, story arcs must be planned out to such a degree. One of the most successful creators made it up as he went along.
Yeah. But to be honest, when people ask me that, because I've done quite well with the novels now, I do say something. You do need to have a proper set structure. I don't make those up as I go. I would be in big trouble if I did that. But yeah, they're very so finely tuned structures. Those ones. There you go. Sorry, destroyed all your dreams.
I have 2 guests with me today who brought with them a panel from a comic or something close. I've said this bit. I always repeat that bit. I've asked everyone on the panel to bring a panel to the panel. You can see those images on my website at kevfcomicartist.com, or they'll be on my Twitter, or they should be on the artwork for this podcast episode, depending where you get your podcasts from. However, don't worry, listener at home, you won't need to see these images because we are going to do an immaculate job of describing them. I think I'd like to begin by having a look at the image Gary has brought along. Right. Can you both see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, listener at home, we're looking at a comic strip panel that's been brought by Gary Northfield. Gary, before you let us know what we're looking at, Juliette, describe it for the listener who can't see it.
Okay, I think I can see most of it. There's lots of red and black, and the top image is of a looks like a character who I'm not familiar with in a car, driving along. His head comes off in the crash, and bugs make it into a motel as the next panel. And his head has definitely come off, and he's saying "ow," which is impressive. And then there's another little bit that I can't see because of the way that my layout is, my viewers. So I'm going to try and change that.
No, you can't. It's cropped off. It is
Right.
actually cropped off.
Okay, there you go. In that case, that's the end of the story, I think.
For the benefit of the panelologists at home who study such thing as line and colour and composition and such, I can tell you that this is drawn in quite bold, cartoony lines. We are looking at something drawn in a humorous cartoon style, big, round eyes, big, wide open mouths. We have a character who looks a bit like a bug, very thin arms, but with white Mickey Mouse type gloves as he drives a 1950s American style car. In the panel, we can see a tiny little bit of, and then in the main panel we see his severed head on the ground, which suggests to me it's not from the Beano, not usually the home of severed heads, and there are bugs crawling in and out of his mouth. I'm saying oh yes, because it says his head comes off in the crash and bugs make it into a motel. The colouring is interesting, greys, reds and shades of red, but it's definitely not in full colour. So a very interesting comic strip. I can't begin to identify where this quasi-humorous strip is from. Oh, was everybody else hearing a hiss in their headphones just then?
No, I'm not wearing headphones at the moment.
I'm not wearing headphones on.
Oh, right. If you weren't hearing a hiss, maybe there's not a hiss. It's gone now. Okay. I can't begin to guess where this is from. However, Juliette, you can have first guess. Any idea where this could be from?
I really don't know. I mean, the signature says sin, I think, which I'm trying to rack my brains. I'm really at a loss, which is great because that means that this is going to be a new comic to me. So thank you for bringing that.
Okay. Right. And I hadn't even spotted that signature. Yes, there's a copyright symbol and then S-I-N. Well, that means nothing immediately to me. I can see also a page number, a number 29, which suggests that this page is sideways on because the lettering is at 90 degrees to us. So this would be at the bottom of a page. And having a letter printed in the middle of a page like that was a very common feature of the humour comics of the 1990s, as was spot colour in just one colour. Things that I used to work on, like Gas and The Damage, although I would have said this was American, especially because just out of shot, I can see the characters referring to my weird friend Erwin, and that's a very American thing to say. Right, I'm going to guess it's American, and I'm going to guess it's from something like Raw, the Art Spiegelman experimental title. Gary, put us out of a misery. What is it?
But it's a comic by a chap called Jay Stevens. I think he's actually Canadian, and it's a collection which only just came out a year or so ago, but it's collecting older strips. So maybe it is from the 90s, but maybe a little bit later. I picked up a few of his comics quite a few years ago while I was developing probably Derek the Sheep, actually. And his stuff was quite an inspiration to me. I liked his kind of dark humor, and some of his strips were definitely made up as they went along. And that's what I really enjoyed about them. You just didn't know where you were going to go, which is why I like that kind of storytelling. When you're writing the story, as you're making it up as you go along, you're on a bit of a journey, you're on a bit of a discovery with your character. And that's exactly what you get with Jay's stories as well. So he's got this weird character who I don't think I've seen before this collection come out, which is called Deject. So it's like a collection of dejected strips, rejected strips. She's just kind of collated into lots and lots of pages, as one would say. So yes, and I just never seen this character called Erwin, and he's just completely funny. Everything goes wrong for him, and he's let me get that page up again. He's got this kind of catchphrase saying, "Look out, it's Erwin. He tried to have fun, but he can't," and stuff. And everything he does goes horribly wrong. And he drops an airplane down a drain. He goes to get it, and this kind of clown character says, "Give me $50," and then all this spit comes up in his mouth and he gets like terrible hepatitis and things like that. So it just everything goes horribly wrong for him.
The cartoon style is reminding me of something of which there was a lot in the 1990s into the 2000s, and that is anarchic TV animation, like Ren and Stimpy was probably the biggest breakthrough title like that.
But he is an artist. He actually broke into TV animation as well. He was doing this kind of dark anarchic stuff personally, and like, you know, with like kind of limited print runs. But then he got into Cartoon Network with, oh gosh, I should know, shouldn't I? Atomic City, maybe, I think it was, or Jet Cat Clubhouse and Oddville. These kind of, I've not actually seen the cartoons myself, so I didn't have like kind of cable or whatever at the time. But yeah, that is his style. He's that kind of cross of like kind of Disney and Cartoon Network, but with his comics is pretty dark undercurrent.
Yeah, it was cable that enabled this stuff to come about, because there was a very clear divide when I was growing up 50 years ago that cartoons were for kids and everything else was for grown-ups, never the twain. There's such an overlap. And it was about the time of the 80s, 90s that really changed, wasn't it?
Yeah. And absolutely. I mean, I fell in love with like Ren and Stimpy and gosh, what South Park's up. But I actually fell out of love. I don't really like all the stuff which is out now, or all the other kind of, I really don't like watching adult kid animation, if you know what I mean. I find it's just all very samey, all the same jokes, and everyone's got like a kind of teenage daughter and a cheeky son and a stupid dad and a clever mum. That seems
you're thinking like American Dad and Family Guy.
Yeah, and anything else you can probably name, you know. So I find them very boring. They're going for like too long as well. So sorry, I shouldn't be negative there.
Well, no, a lot of these things target a certain audience. Comics like this, which I was seeing, and things like Raw and Peter Bag's Hate. I was in my 20s when I was seeing that, and it was stoner comics, really kind of alternative society comics for the 90s. Music that comics that you'd watch while listening to Nirvana and going to see a Cameron Crowe film.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because at the time I was working in an art shop around the corner from Gosh Comics in London. So I was always nipping over there on my lunch break and just discovering mad odd comics from like America and Canada, and sometimes from the continent. And just, they were really inspiring me, because whenever I went to your Bristol comic fair, that was the first thing I went to. With
listener, I used to run the comic festival in Bristol. That's what Gary, who you have to be old to remember it, 1999 to 2004. Thank you for coming, Gary.
Thanks for asking. Maybe you did ask, or maybe no, you wouldn't have known who I was. I didn't know who I was. So I just turned up. I just made this comic, which I spent about a year and a half on, this really terrible homemade comic. But I was really surprised, because all the other homemade comics are all very kind of 2000 AD based. There wasn't anybody doing kind of dark humor, sort of silly, like Ren and Stimpy type stuff. So it was nice to go to Gosh and find all these weird stuff like this guy, Jay Stevens, and it just completely blew my mind. And that's where I went. I went off. And originally, when I did Derek the Sheep, it was actually quite sweary and rude. And so Ewan says, well, if we take these bits out, it could actually work, kind of thing. So, and it did. It was really nice.
Yes, it is disappointing when you see a lot of wannabe comic creators just doing the same old, and things do get into a lot of ruts. I remember an awful lot of people who wanted to be doing Marvel superhero comics, and so that's all you'd see would be fanzines which looked like Marvel superhero comics, but inevitably not so good. And then the 2000 AD wannabes. So yes, to break that mold was a very good thing.
Cool. Yeah. No. And I did get to meet a few like-minded people. There's people like Tom Gold, who was hanging around, who does a lot of gag panels and things, and Matt Abyss and Dave Shelton and a few others. We ended up doing an anthology as well, like a couple of years later, called Sentence. So we brought out this kind of book with 8 creators. Mark Stafford as well. Do you know Mark Stafford?
Yes, from the Cartoon Museum now.
So it was really nice. It was actually brilliant going to your kind of comic fairs, just to get to know like-minded cartoonists. It was amazing, actually. It was really good, especially down at pub after. It was amazing.
So this is
where it all kind of comes together, you know.
Yeah, now that's the thing that may have changed in subsequent years. I'm not sure that comic conventions are just an extended pub crawl, which they were, weren't they?
They were a bit, but they're completely, they're very different now. Very different.
Well, they were slightly blokey as well, I think, 20 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
There weren't as many female creators by any stretch.
Yeah, and that's probably very true, actually. But then the small press fair started coming out about sort of 2003, 2004, and that was a bit more embraced into encouraging sort of non-white males to come along, basically. So that's when things started to expand, and people could see what you could do. Basically, you can play around with formats, play around with any style of storytelling. You don't have to just do 2000 AD. You don't have to just do the Beano. You can do literally anything. And I think that's when things were kind of taken off with like Fantagraphics, and who was the British equivalent who was kind of publishing their stuff. It was bringing out sort of Daniel Clowes and whatever, and Chris Ware.
Top Shelf?
Pantheon, people like that. I'm trying to think of the UK publisher, but they were reprinting
Slab of Concrete.
No, it's, I think it's Pantheon. I've probably got it here somewhere. But
Juliette, how much does this sound like language from another planet?
Not entirely. I mean, I've been to Comic-Con twice, and for me that was where I was like, I found my people. So although I have never illustrated comics apart from pencil drawings when I was 10 years old, and I tried to make some comics happen back then, but so I've never done it digitally, but so that's all completely alien to me, but certainly at Comic-Con and online I've noticed there's so many amazing female artists out there, so maybe I've brought my own offering might be of a female artist.
Well, this would be the perfect time to find out what it is you have brought.
Shall I share the screen there? I
need to make you a co-host for you to be able to do that. Okay, when you're ready.
Okay. I really have to tell you though, this was one of the hardest decisions I've had to make. So, and I'll explain why in a bit. But can you see now?
Oh yeah.
Okay, we're looking at the image that Juliette's brought. You'll be able to find this on my website, kevfcomicartist.com, and it should be on the holding artwork, the episode artwork, wherever you get your podcasts from. But you shouldn't need to see it because we're about to describe it, aren't we, Gary?
Yeah, I suppose so. Actually, it's a very sort of similar colour range to the one I've just had on. So there seems to be two chaps in a room, and I'm guessing it could be like a kind of numbskulls thing. I'm not sure. One's got a top hat on, a blue top hat, and a blue coat dress thing, and he's pushing a big plug into a machine, and he's saying she's just watched an advert on TV that has kittens in, and then you've got this quizzical figure at the back, and saying, I've got Full of Rage, and there's like a Wheel of Fortune, and the Wheel of Fortune's pointing to Full of Rage, but you've got gleeful, horny, and something, I can't quite make that out. Bit sad, very sad. Immediately go to bed, bit angry. And he goes, okay, this should be interesting.
Yes.
Wheel of Feels. Sorry, I missed that. My God, the big thing says Wheel of Feels at the top there.
For the benefit of the panelologists at home who study these sort of things, this is drawn, hand-drawn with line, I would say. It's big, bold lines. The similarity with the numbskulls in the Beano is immediate to those of us who were brought up with the numbskulls on the Beano. And the current numbskulls writer and artist, Nigel Ochterlooney, who's been a guest on this podcast, works in a very similar stripped-down style to this artist. However, this is not from the numbskulls because it refers to being horny, which nobody has yet, I think, done in the Beano. The flat colours are very interesting. They're muted. We've got a pink wall, then we've got a pink plus grey floor. We've got a grey. Yes, we've got very knocked back colours, very pale pink people with spindly stick figure legs, which is a very interesting choice to make. One that in my classes I tell kids not to do. But there you go. Someone bigger than me has made that choice. I couldn't begin to guess where this is from. But Gary, do you want to have a first guess?
I kind of feel I ought to know, but I don't. I really can't think who it could be.
Stab in the dark?
Stab in the dark. I got no stabs and no dark. No, I can't think. I generally blank. I've no idea.
Okay, I'm going to say it's a British creator. I'm going to say it's a British creator from the last 10 years, an independently published creator, although they could be with a big publisher, but they're not in, I think, something like the Beano or the Phoenix. They are probably on the shelves of Waterstones, and this is a book looking at psychological behind the scenes, a bit like the film it's not the film Up, the other one about your emotions, Inside Out, Disney Pixar one, but this is doing it probably in a darker way, because one of these characters is wearing a top hat, a bit like a mortician or grave funeral director. So all I can say is British indie, and I'm going to say it's called Not the Numbskulls. Juliette, what is it?
So close. It is called Wired Up Wrong by Rachel Smith, and published.
Oh God, yeah.
Rachel Smith, who we all know from Quarantine Comics this year.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, it was published in November 2016, so yeah, also spot on with the dates as well. I honestly, you've given me. It was so hard, Kev. It was so hard to choose. But actually, I feel quite proud that the two that I was thinking of bringing today, one was Rachel, and one was another female artist who goes by Just Peachy on Instagram. So it's Just Peachy Comic. I don't know if you know her, but she's amazing. But I know that she doesn't need my, like, she's not British, and so I was like, I should support a fellow female Brit. So that's why I brought Rachel to the panel today. And I was given this book, the Wired Up Wrong book, which for the benefits of podcast listeners, I am holding up to the screen right now. I was given it by one of my audience members who came to see me firstly in 2015 at the Edinburgh Fringe, which was my first sold out year, and then went on to sell out for the next 4 years. And he used to work in advertising, and I was doing a show at the time about body image, body confidence, that was very open about my history of eating disorders, and been from a size 4 to a size 20 due to binge eating disorder, and been sectioned for anorexia and struggled with bulimia. And he had left advertising because of the damaging effects he felt advertising was having on people's body image, and he now works in the arts and does a lot of illustration himself, and he sent me Rachel's book, and I love it. I just love how unknown it is, and it was so hard to choose her over Just Peachy Comic, who I also love, who does very similar things of bringing to life what it feels like on the inside. There's something really beautiful about comic panels and comic strips that can very succinctly and deftly show what a mental illness is like, and what it feels like on the inside. And I thought about going for Squirrel Girl, I thought about going for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which honestly, that was the one I was so close to doing, because I that was my first ever comic that I fell completely in love with.
I for one, am really glad you chose Rachel Smith. We've seen Quarantine Comics this year. She's been serializing it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, and in daily installments. It's now collected up in a book. It's now in Waterstones, because I saw it in Waterstones at the weekend, which is a fantastic triumph for anybody publishing in this area, publishing something which is so hard to describe, and you couldn't in advance say, I'm going to write about how I feel during this forthcoming pandemic, and then for it to have worked out as it does. In Quarantine Comics, she draws in her naturally, it's sort of light and humorous style. The faces are manga-esque, Disney-esque. They're light, they're friendly, they're involving. And so it's disarming when she's then really describing her anxiety and these difficult situations, always with a joke, always with a punchline. It's splendid work. Now, in Wired Up Wrong, is she always using the style we see before us of this sort of simple outline?
No, she also has, I've got another one I can share with you if you want to see.
Just tell us, because it's an audio podcast for most people.
No, there's also a kind of slightly more Disney-esque, like maybe a more recent Disney. Funnily enough, Inside Out, Disney-esque kind of, but with pencil drawings, so but the face shape similar. But it is always that kind of wonderful thing of brightish colors, slightly muted, but really simplistic and really very to the point, and not veering away from the darkness. So making sure that the humor is a way, like I said earlier, humor is a way of making sure that we can tolerate the darkness and shine a light on it, and help people understand that it's useful. So yeah, the drawings are, they're very simple but lovely, clearly pencil lines. Really, I think you guys will be able to describe it a lot better than I can. I just know that they make me giggle.
Well, the line drawing as one side, there's a subgenre of TV comedy which they describe as cringe comedy. Most recently, I've been watching Pen 15, which if you've not seen it is marvelous, about teenagers growing up, two teenage girls in America. And what Rachel Smith did with Quarantine Comics is like that. You're cringing or you're feeling the pain, but through the humor. So the humor makes it presentable and palatable and makes you want to read it. But her point is there underneath, and that is bittersweet, is I suppose the term.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's partly why I love her work, is just that it's so, it brings out the empathy in you, that you just you understand her perspective so much better, which helps you understand your perspective better. But then you also, my heart just, I just want to give her a massive cuddle. And I think that especially in Wired Up Wrong, it's a very sweet, there's even a picture of her at the back of Wired Up Wrong. It's a very sweet book that there was another book called that I love, which is Living with a Black Dog. I think Andrew John is it Andrew Johnston, I think. Do you know it, Kev?
No.
Oh, that one's another one it's a similar vein of it's a comic book that is all about living with depression, and I recommend it to anybody when I do when they ask me about recommendations for books about mental health. Is comics and comic strips can just make it so clear so quickly what it feels like, what the reality of living with it is. And Rachel does that in this book, Wired Up Wrong, that just shows that some people they see the world differently, they process things differently, and it's not to be feared, it's okay. And again, Living with a Black Dog is another fantastic book that does that, but specifically about depression, whereas Rachel, I think in Wired Up Wrong, covers anxiety, and this image as well is less about, it can be about mental health, but it could also be about hormones and just any moment that you're feeling a bit tired. We've all had that moment where you feel like these little men in our heads are spinning a wheel of like, I've got no idea how I'm going to react to this, but here we go. And I love how accessible it makes it.
It's not an unusual feeling that somebody inside is operating it. I mean, the fact that Disney Pixar's Inside Out was picked up on by the Beano and the Numbskulls, almost they felt like it was flattering that they had been imitated, because that idea is a feeling that a lot of people have. Something is controlling you within, and it's almost like a little avatar of you carrying out unfulfilled instructions in the way that people do. If you were piloting a ship, you would crash into the rocks occasionally, and that's just what's going on in your head.
I just love the fact that, again, because it's art, you can draw on the colors as well to kind of just bring out what the darkness is, and use the darkness more carefully within the color palette that you use. And I just think that being able to, it feels very visceral when you see it, and that's where I think comics can, on Instagram as well, there's so many amazing artists out there that are using Instagram to connect with a community and also express themselves and what it is that they're struggling with. Rachel, I don't know, if I don't follow her on Instagram, so I need to check whether she's on there or not, because she is amazing. But yeah, being able to do it so deftly and shareably, and make it very easy for the next generation to educate themselves and be more mental health literate, mental health eloquent, it's a really powerful tool.
Yes, I would say for anybody wanting to get an understanding of anxiety through the quarantine year, Quarantine Comics by Rachel Smith would be one to seek out. And for anybody seeking out examples of how to get a point over simply and quickly in 4 panels, that same book it's textbook. It really is an exemplary piece of work. We've just been looking at Wired Up Wrong by Rachel Smith, that was brought in by Juliette Burton, and we've been looking at the work of J. Stevens, brought in by Gary Northfield. Thank you both. If you'd like to ask us any questions about these things, I suppose you can find us on our social media, can't you? Gary, where do we find you?
Oh, flipping heck. Yes, I'm on Instagram. Stupid Monster, I think I'm on there. I should know. And G. Northfield as well on Twitter, which I end up retweeting politics. I don't look there.
And Juliette, where do we find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm Juliette with two T's and an E Burton. Juliette, it's like in Shakespeare, but also spelt the French way. So I'm like Shakespeare in French, which is like two GCSEs rolled into one. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm very hard work. I am also on Twitter, Juliette Burton. So it's Juliette_Burton on Instagram, Juliette Burton on Twitter, Juliette Burton writer performer on Facebook, and julietteburton.co.uk for my website. And I've got some gigs coming up, actual real life gigs where we can laugh in a room together. Do you remember?
Oh, we look forward to that. You'll find me on Twitter at Kev F Comic Artist and on the website kevfcomicartist.com. Please click subscribe to be sure of hearing every episode of this podcast when it comes out, and leave us a review, why don't you? Thank you again to Gary Northfield and to Juliette Burton, and to you at home for listening. I've been Kev F, and this has been Comic Cuts, the panel show. And we're out.
I'm following you on Instagram now, Gary.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I should follow you back. I haven't got my phone with me, so no, that's very interesting. I've been watching some of your videos actually, just to prepare coming today. I loved what you're doing. It's brilliant. It's really cool.
Oh,
really brilliant. Yeah.
Depending on which video it is, check when it was filmed, because I've gotten a lot funnier recently.
You know, I watched one where you did what's that pub which does all the kind of newcomer stand-up stuff?
The Cavendish Arms.
Yeah, the Cavendish Arms, because I've been there a couple of times. I nearly did it once as well, like do a stand-up. But it was great to see that. That was really nice, because you had the television screens plus a few people dotted around laughing.
Yeah, that was in April, when it was the other comedians were allowed in the room, but the audience were on Zoom and the audience was silent. So it was bizarre, but also just so good to get that microphone back in my hands. Thank you so much for having me, Kev, and thank you for asking me. I do love comics, and it's something that I don't shout about as much as I could do, because I feel a bit like I'm not an illustrator, and I'm not so like I don't have the memory of all of them, but I'm
really pleased to hear that, because I didn't know. I just knew that you had done cosplay and shared pictures of it, and so you'd been to the Comic-Con, so I thought there's definitely an overlap there. But as for your interest in actual titles, I didn't know.
Oh no, I could have rabbited on for ages about the Avengers and the MCU. I'm very much MCU. I like DC, but I prefer MCU. And
Loki tomorrow, come on, are we ready for that?
No, I'm so excited.
I'm so excited as well. Yeah.
So my sister. So I found out when I was 17 that I was a sperm donor conceived child, and my sister is actually my dad's child, and she's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, golden child, and I'm the weird
Frost Giant's daughter or whatever.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally that, and I'm like, okay, so I'm very invested in Loki.
Oh, well done.
Oh, fantastic. If this podcast continues, then everybody will be welcome back a second time. This has been an absolute treat. I'm going to stop the recording now.